Color grading is an art form to which the final look of any image is decided. This process can be both tedious and time-consuming. In our last video, we discussed simple techniques and approaches to using lookup tables in Premiere Pro. Today, we dive into the world of DaVinci Resolve. Resolve is a node-based color grading suite with an arsenal of tools. It could be a bit scary, but you see, that's kind of the whole point. Wait, let me explain. There are so many ways you can choose to transform an image, and Resolve gives you access to every tool that you may need, keeping your workflow flexible. This is why it's still an industry standard interface and software today. Okay, we know Resolve is great, but how do we use it? You might want to skip to this timeline mark if you already understand how the interface works. Resolve has different pages that cater to different aspects of production. There's a media pool where you get to organize your footage, the cut page for sifting through footage quickly, the edit page for assembling final edits, the fusion page for VFX and compositing, the color page for color grading, which we are actually discussing today, the Fairlight page for sound engineering and mixing, and finally, the deliver page. We use nodes to color grade in DaVinci Resolve. Nodes are points in time in our color grading process. Every node's input is dependent on the output of the previous node. By creating different nodes, we can go back to different points in time in our color grading process. With this understanding, we can build what is called a node tree, which is simply the way each adjustment is connected. Let's create one node for the overall exposure of our image. And now let's create another node for the contrast levels and a final node for our color balance. The wheels you see at the bottom are called primaries. They all give you the ability to boost or reduce signals. A good way to illustrate this is using a gradient. The first we'll discuss is the offset wheel. The offset wheel moves the entire signal up or down. Second is gain. This moves the entire signal without moving the darkest point of the image. The third is gamma. This boosts the entire signals while leaving the darkest and brightest points of the image constant. And the last one is called lift. Lift only lifts the darkest portion of the image while keeping the brightest point of the image constant. Before we start any form of color grading, it is very important to have some sort of color management process that would make sure our final result matches with the adjustments we have made in the software. Here are my current settings I'm using to color manage my image. So I'm going to click on settings and head to color management. Now I'm going to select DaVinci YRGB color managed. Let's turn off automatic color management and let's select custom. So now we can set the parameters by ourselves. For the input color space, I'm going to leave it in Rec 709. So let's change this timeline color space to DaVinci wide gamut / intermediate. I work in DaVinci wide gamut, so I have wider latitude to adjust my image. And for the working luminance, I'm going to switch this to custom and I'm going to give it 10,000 nits. Of course, the output is in Rec 709 2.4. I always match my input color space with my output color space if I'm working with multiple image sources. This way, nothing happens to the image unless I want something to happen to it. All I have to do is set the various input color spaces of the various images. So I'm going to hold shift, I'm going to click on this clip because these are all the same cameras. They're all shot on a Sony A7 IV. I'm going to right click and I'm going to select input color space, and they were shot in S-3 Cine S-Log3. That's the color space for this footage, and boom, now that's actually color managed. So let's move on to the next set of clips. This was B-roll. Because it's B-roll, it's already color managed. Same thing with this clip, so this is color managed as well. I think I've previously set the color space on this one. It was in HLG. If I didn't shoot in any special color profile, I could simply declare it as Rec 709. Another good practice before color grading is the use of groups. I can categorize similar scenes or similar cameras by grouping them, making it easy to make wider adjustments instead of going clip by clip. I'm going to hold shift and click again. Now I'm going to right click and I'm going to add it into a new group. I'm going to call this group Sony A7 IV. Now, by observation, we can already see that there are a few things that are common across all the clips. One of them is the color balance and the exposure is just a little bit underexposed, and the color balance is more towards the warm side. We can confirm about the color balance by checking out the vectorscope. So now we're looking at the vectorscope. We can see that everything is in the left quadrant of the vectorscope. This already tells us that the white balance is wrong. I'm going to click here and I'm going to select group pre-clip, and now, as the name implies, this happens before the adjustment of the clip, while this happens after the adjustment of the clip. And there are some settings I want to happen before the clip, and there are some set of settings I want to happen after the clip. Now I'm going to press P to just make it bigger so I can get a better view of the image. Now I can see some noise, and I think we could get rid of that in our pre-clip. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create 3 nodes. I'm going to hold Alt and I'm going to press S. The first node, I'm going to label it for my noise reduction. So I'll just write NR. The second node, I'm going to use it to sharpen. And the last node, I'll call it like a general balance. Let's first do the noise reduction. When you click right here, this takes you to the motion effects tab, and this has noise reduction. We have 2 types of noise reduction in Resolve. We have the temporal noise reduction and spatial noise reduction. So I'm just going to click on temporal noise reduction and select 3 frames, and I'm going to increase the noise reduction. As I'm pulling up the noise reduction, you can start to see the noise is disappearing. If I disable this node by clicking here, you see we had so much noise. I'm pressing Ctrl Z now or Command Z, depending on if you're on a Windows or Mac, and maybe we could just even boost it further. And yeah, we've gotten rid of most of that noise. So next thing we're going to do is add some sharpening. We'll move to the right. So we're going to move to the sharpen tab, and I'll just move this to the left, and I'll add some sharpening. Maybe a little bit, not so much. And let's disable and enable. Yeah, we can definitely see the sharpening has been added. So it's time to balance this clip out. I'm going to go to my offset wheel to move up the general exposure. I believe we discussed this earlier. So I'm just going to move this to my right. I'm just going a bit overboard with this, and that has brought up the exposure levels. And now I'm going to attempt to fix the white balance now. So I'm going to pull down my reds, and I believe my grains as well. You see we're really starting to balance out. And I'm just going to keep working that until I see a good balance point. And somewhere there is fine. Now everything is kind of balanced out. Everything is kind of neutral. We can now go on to build our look. A look is simply the network of adjustments that stay consistent throughout a grade. It could comprise of multiple adjustments and or a lookup table. So to build a look, go head on to the timeline tab. By default, that is going to be empty. Sometimes you can build your look on the group post clip tab, but in this case, because I'm using my group for other purposes, I'll build it on the timeline. Any node graph you build on the timeline is going to affect every clip contained in the timeline. So I'm going to hold Option and I'm going to press S. Now I have done that. This has created a new node. And what you need to know when building a look, there's not necessarily a written rule on how look should be developed. It's totally subjective. Sometime earlier, I released a LUT called Revival. So I'm going to click on my LUTs page and I'm going to check on my LUT Revival, and I'm going to just drag it to the timeline. And right away, you can see what that LUT is doing across all the footage. Now it's doing some great things and it's doing some not so great things, but that's fine. Would definitely have to balance it out and probably even push it back a bit. So let's scale it back. Let's pull it back, and just make sure it's not doing too much to our image. I think about 0.3, 0.36, yeah, about this should be nice. Yeah. So right now it's not doing too much, and I think we can balance it out. Let's like create another node after, and let's bring down the reds a bit, try and pull down the grains as well, maybe increase the blues and just balance it out a bit. What we must know about the primaries: the colors red, green and blue are called additive colors. Whenever we add, as the name implies, any of them, they make the image brighter, and the colors that are complementary or opposite to them are called subtractive colors, and these colors are cyan, magenta and yellow. All you need to do is remember RGB CMY. So I'm gonna just nudge this a bit, maybe even, yeah, somewhere around there. So if you could spend all day trying to find the balance point, I believe we have the vectorscope for that, and somewhere around there seems fine. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is draw the tone curve for this look. I'm going to keep it simple. Let's go to the curve here. This Y represents luminance, so it's not going to be working with the entire RGB. So let's just click on that for a second. Now, if you have not already enabled, click on it, right? I always watch the histograms output. So you have set this when you get into your software. So let's add default anchors. So I'm going to be looking at my waveform again. And I want to just draw a curve that would basically limit everything in such a manner that will be pleasing to me. So let's bring this down, this down as well, just a bit. Maybe we'll open this up, yeah, something like that, something very simple like that. Now, in case you don't know where is what, you can just tap on your eyedropper here, the qualifier, and it would highlight any point you are trying to target. So something like that is not bad. I think I want to come back to this balance and just balance it out a bit, and this as well. Yeah, something like that seeming a lot better. Yeah. So now, look wise, I think the last thing I'll do is I'll add a cross process. To add a cross process, let's create another node, and I'm going to create a curve. Let's create one from the blue and one with the red. So what we're going to do is I'll click on the darker side. So that's created a point on the dark side, and I'll click on a brighter side, maybe even brighter somewhere here. Okay, that's fine for now. So I'm going to take down my blue just a touch, just slightly, just a touch, because this is very sensitive. In my shadow side, I'm going to bring up the blue just a touch, and I'm going to do also the same thing with the red. So I'm just going to add a touch of red, and I'm going to add a touch of cyan. What we're effectively doing is creating a cross process. We can also even fine-tune it by using the sliders right here. So we could pull back the sliders, the red, the blue, and now we have like a little mixer. So we just want this to be very subtle. Now I've created a simple look with very basic elements. We have not done anything much here. We just had a lookup table. I balanced it out and added just a little bit cross process and a little nice tone curve. So we have all the elements that we can say would be required to create a basic look. We just make sure that as we flip around, it generally works across all the clip. Now we're going to start zeroing in. The next thing we're going to do is go to our clip level. This is where we begin to start major grading. For every clip level grade, I usually work with 3 simple parameters: exposure, contrast, and balance. So we're going to hold Option S again and create 3 nodes. Now I've created, we would like to label this node. So I'm going to right click, create node label. This last one will be called balance, the middle one will be called contrast, and the first one is exposure. Now I understand that we have already fixed the exposure prior, so we might not need to even mess with this node at the moment. So for the exposure side, I use the offset to set the exposure, and for the contrast, I use the contrast and pivot. Let's set the contrast. When you move the contrast slider to the right, you're effectively adding contrast. So basically, you're pushing the darkest part away from the brightest part, so there's additional contrast. And then when you move the pivot slider, you are either darkening or brightening the image, because you're moving the point at which the contrast is going to be drawn from. So if I move it to the left, I'm brightening the image, and if I move it to the right, I'm darkening the image. So let's just brighten the image up a bit. So yeah, something like that is not so bad. I would also like to drop some of the highlights, because we've got some of our brightness levels spilling outside the waveform. So I might even take the gain down and maybe open up the gamma and maybe pull down the highlights. If you could look around, you could see like there's a digital texture to the image. To soften it out, we could just move our mid detail slider to the left, and now we've got like a softer image. Yeah, if we hold Alt or Option and press P, we'll create what is called a parallel node. A parallel node simply means that the adjustments we make on the node happen at the same instance with the node above it. There are many instances at which we would like to use a parallel node. So let's just disconnect this right here and connect this to the input. Mind you, this is the input and this is the output of the image. Now I'm going to press Shift S to create a node before this. Now we have two nodes. So think about it this way. The top portion of this parallel node would be your primary, and the bottom portion would be your secondaries. So what I like to do here is to create some palette adjustments. Now, first thing I'm noticing when I look at my vectorscope, it's very clear to me that we are almost clipping the red. That's because of this flower, and I believe that's because of the light hitting the flower. So we can scale this back in. We can use the sat versus sat curve. So if we go to the curves, we'll search for saturation versus saturation. So this is basically like a saturation slider, and we can use it to control various portions of the image. So let's just use the eyedropper and click on this, and we're going to click here. This is going to create a spline which you can use to control the way the curve rolls off or bends. So we're going to pull down, and we have to narrow in. Yeah, somewhere around there is not actually bad, but we have to make sure that we're not affecting other portions of the image, and we have to keep our curve as smooth as possible. And already you could see by doing this, we have taken it out of the 75% saturation line. And now, next thing we're going to do, let's move to this next node, and let's label it. We'll call it color. Now, I use the shortcut to label the node. That's because I already set it in my preferences. By default, there's no shortcut for node label, so you could set your own custom shortcut in keyboard customization. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do, let's head to the hue versus hue tab, and we're going to really create and define the palette at this point. Let's create some points, and let's start to rotate the hue. So by looking at the outputs of the histogram, you can easily judge where the colors are sitting, and you can decide to make judgment calls on where you want them to be. Now this part is mostly subjective and it might differ from clip to clip, but basically I'm just making decisions that instinctively work for what I'm trying to create at the moment. And a simple curve like that, let's take that off. Yeah, something like that works. I want to make sure that the blue is sitting at the right place. And yeah, already you could see that we've really taken this image from a place it was to where it is now. So I just created another node. I'm going to right click on this node. I'm going to change the color space to HSV, and I'm going to remove the H channel, which is channel 1. I'm going to remove the V channel, which is channel 3. leaving S or saturation. And I'm going to go back to the primaries and I'm just going to lift up the gamma. And this is going to add a little bit organic saturation to the whole image. So just a little bit, nothing too serious. Can even take down the gain and you can see what that did. So to round up the grade / look, what I'll do is I'll go to my group post clip and I'm going to create almost like a glue effect, but I'm going to do it by using what is called a layer node. Now to create a layer node, you're going to hold Option L. Now I've created a layer node. The next thing we're going to do is change the blend mode or composite mode to soft light. Now I've done that, you can see that the image looks terrible, but it won't in a second. So we're going to go to the sharpness tab or blur tab again, and we're going to really blur out the image until it's really blurry, like so. And we're going to reshape the image response. So basically this is another subjective part, and what you're trying to do is basically create a curve by using your primaries on how you want the image to behave glow wise. So I also want to take down the saturation, because once you are adding a lot of blur, it's very easy for the saturation to go up as well. So I'm going to just take back saturation a lot, and I'm also going to reduce the key gain significantly so that it's just blending on top of our image. Yeah, so like 0.3, somewhere around 0.3 is always not bad. And you can see what it's doing for us. It's helping us refocus the light while softening out the image because we blurred it. So can you see that? That's quite nice if you ask me. And this is affecting all the clips at the same time. So I think for this clip we have not done bad at all. So let's move to the next clip. A quick way to grab the same grade that we did in the previous clip: select and control clicking, and I'll just right click and select apply grade. I might not retain all the properties. For instance, I don't think we need that much saturation here because of his skin. So I've deleted that node, and we can retain the sat versus sat and the color palette, since the palette must stay consistent. Contrast wise, I think we should also redefine what the contrast response would be. Let's add some contrast and brighten up the image, and maybe pull back the gain and pull up the image on the gamma side. So let's look into that. Maybe we might even take back some of the highlights and raise up the gamma to compensate. Let's look at that. So the only thing I think is in our balance node, that's when we are going to make some adjustments. You can see that there's this cyan tint on his beard and it makes the image look weird. So we're going to remember RGB CMY. If we see cyan and we want cyan away, we'll just have to add red to cancel out the effect of that cyan. So I'm going to go to the log wheels. It's located here in our primaries, and I'm going to select the log wheels. Now what the log wheels do is they select a very specific portion of the image, which we can define by moving this range right here. So let me just do a quick demonstration. I'm going to add a ton of nonsense to the image, and if I move this range, it's selecting the illuminant range of the image. Now if we really want to see that, I think the best way is to look at it with the gradient. So then let me just say the almost darker portions of the image is where they're affecting by default, and then when you increase the range, it starts affecting more portions of the image, and when you reduce the range, it's affecting less portion of the image. And same thing with the highlight slider. So by default it affects only the brightest parts of the image, and as you vary the range, it starts to affect other portions of the image. So let's get back to our grade. Let's reset this. We're going to add some red to the shadow. Let's click on this clip so that we can see this better. We're going to add some red to the shadow, and now we're going to, let's
move the gamma so it balances out a bit, and maybe, yeah, just a touch. So I'm instinctively doing all these movements, and yeah, something like that's not bad. Maybe let's take off the edge by taking off the mid detail so that the image appears softer. This part of her hair is very distracting for this image, and I would like to create what is called a power window. Although generally I still think I've not really nailed our balance. I can still see some green, so I would like to take that green away and maybe pull down the reds in the gain as well. So remember, the gain is for the topmost portions of the image. It moves most of the brighter stuff as against the dark stuff. I think maybe we might have gone too crazy on the mid detail, or maybe not. Yeah, somewhere there's actually not bad. Let's press Shift S to create a node before, and what we're going to do is go over to power windows, and I'm going to select this very last one, which is like a gradient, and I'm going to select this side because I really want to just darken this a bit. So let's tap on the highlight to see what our selection is. I just want to darken some of these bright portions. And remember, what does our gain do? Our gain controls the brighter parts of the image without moving the darkest points as much. So let's just pull down our gain, and to compensate, because now we're really starting to push down the shadow portions, we'll open up the gamma. But basically, we want these other portions to be significantly darker. You know, most of the time it's going to be a back and forth, and you just have to like find the sweet spot. But I'm good with this clip as well, and I'm just going to, since this other clip is kind of the same with this, I'm just going to click on this clip and right click and apply grade, and now we can see the grade copies even with the power window, and I'm satisfied with that. It's not a necessity for you to even make adjustments to every clip. Like this particular clip, I'm very happy with the way it looks, and I haven't even done a single thing to it. And that's the beauty of having like a macro level adjustment, like the timeline adjustment that we had prior. So that's that. And I think this is the last clip or the second to last clip on this, and I'm just going to take from here. I'm just going to apply. Let's right click and apply. Yeah, and I think that's fine. That's very fine. It's actually not so bad, and I'm not even thinking about doing anything else. Maybe just take care of the levels. Just bring the game back because I believe it was a bit too hot. Now, if you always want to create the default nodes from the beginning, you could save or grab the still as a power grade. I'm going to go to my power grades, and I'm going to select the primary and apply grade. So we have loaded up our default nodes again, and I'm just going to balance it out. Let's look at our vectorscope so we know what we're doing. And I'm just going to balance it out. Yeah, it's not bad at all. Maybe add some warmth in the camera, and let's mess with the contrast. So let's darken the image. Yeah, something like that's not bad. I'm actually okay with this. Maybe take off some of that edge with a mid detail. Yeah, not bad at all. So let's move to the raw clip. By looking at our vectorscope, we already know that we're not balanced. So let's again load our default nodes, just apply grade, and let's try and balance it out. We just have to straddle this until we find like a nice balance point. Yeah, something like that's not bad. And let's work the contrast. Let's go to the waveform. Let's add a bit of contrast, and let's still brighten the image as well. Maybe add a little more contrast. I went crazy with the pivots just now. Yeah, something around there is not bad actually. So it's looking alright on the vectorscope. Again, let's create the parallel node, Option or Alt P. Right click, clean up the nodes, and let's connect this to the beginning. And I just want to create like, you see this part of the ground is very bright and it's taking away some of the attention from him. So just click on our power window again, but this time I'm going to use like a circular power window. I'm just going to increase the size a lot, rotate it, and change the aspect. So let's rotate it this way. Now we can click here to highlight and see what's going on. So I'm going to click here again so that it inverts our selection, and I'm going to increase the size like so and change the aspect, and let's change the position as well and soften it up a lot. So I just want this portion to be the only place affected. So any place that is not shaded gray is the place that our adjustment is going to be affecting. I'm going to bring down the gain, something like that is fine. Let me move it a bit, and yeah, there's a little more focus on him. So I think we need to be mindful of the balance, somewhere around there, because it was just a little bit too warm and hot just now. So yeah, that's for him. I could do a lot more, to be honest with you, but I believe this is a basic way to start. We could get like a palette adjustment. So let's go to our curves, our hue versus hue curves, and let's just start selecting stuff and making changes. And the beauty of shooting in RAW is you get all that latitude to move stuff around. So I'm just going to make this green, so there's a little more color separation, because you don't want the image to just look like everything is jumbled up together. And yeah, something like that. I'm actually quite fine with that. And then let's do the same thing for this guy. Let's create once again our default node, and I think I'm okay with the exposure. Let's just balance it out first. Yeah, somewhere around there. It's fine. Let's click on this clip to hide, and let's see what we could do contrast wise. Yeah, contrast wise, we could just add a touch of contrast. Maybe, close the pivot up. Now we've got some really hot spots here. I don't know if we can recover them, but I'm just going to go to my camera raw tab, and I will go into decode using clip. So let's just see, can we get a highlight recovered? Yeah, we got a highlight recovered after we click highlight recovery. So that really helps us to get that nasty portion of the image out. And yeah, that's quite nice. I'm very okay with that. And this is more so color correction, but then the overall look is still in the image. And in the final shot, we're just going to once again create our default node graph, and let's look at the vectoroscope. And it's not so bad in terms of balance, but I feel like it's in one quadrant, and let's just straddle until we get like a relatively good point. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to add some warmth into the gamma, and I'm going to play my offset against my gamma, so that way I'm getting another split toning effect going. You can see what that's doing. Now to push this even further, let's remember the HSV trick I showed you prior. Let's do it again. So I'm just going to tap Alt S and go right click to color space, set this to HSV, change the channels 1 and 3. So now we have only channel 2 leaving our saturation. Now if you want to do this, you can always grab a still of this and save it as a power grid, as I've done so. So let's increase the gamma. You can see how much rich saturation, and we're already getting that sunset feeling coming through. Maybe we can also work the contrast of this shot. Yeah, so something like that's actually not bad.
So you see, with very simple tools, we can actually create very effective results in Resolve. If you really thought this video was amazing, please share, like, and comment. You could also follow me on Instagram. I'll be here to answer your questions in the comment section. And I can't wait to see you guys on the next video.